Any questions about anything we talked about last? Okay. Looking at the 1870s, sorry, 1780s, about the 1840s for the first phase. Later on, we will talk about the second phase of Romanticism, but right now that's the period we're focusing on. And remember, different countries focusing on different countries. Research and particularly excel for painting. It's going to be the French, and for music, Central Europe, so primarily the Germans and Austrians. Now, there are going to be some exceptions. Remember last time we left off, we were talking about Goethe, and one thing I did not mention with Goethe, which I want to mention now, is Goethe is kind of taking, he's one that really starts Romanticism in Germany. Prior to Goethe, and Goethe's early works are an example of what's called the Sturm und Drang movement. Sturm und Drang is storm and strikes. So Goethe's early works, part of the Sturm und Drang, is storm and stress. And his later works are kind of they become even more emotional, and they lead it into early German Romanticism. So he really starts this new genre, taking it much further than anyone before him in German literature. As I told you last time, once the sufferings of young Werther became translated, people started getting the Werther fever not only in Germany but in other places in translation. So it really had a strong hold on people. It kind of allows them to see things in an entirely new way. Now, I want to give you an example of a romantic painting, just to give you an idea of what the Romantics were all about. But then, a little later on, we're going to be actually going into the different types of romantic painting. But here would be the typical example of a romantic painting. Okay, you see a tall teenage male, his late teens. He's tall, he's thin, he's delicate, pale cheeks, red lips, rouged cheeks. He's all alone. It's midnight. There's a full moon above him. He's at the edge of a cliff. And just as the clock strikes 12, he jumps off of the cliff into the ravaging rapids below. All right, so what would make something like that so romantic? Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily the word romantic itself. It was more that you felt something so strong that you felt the need to do that.
Right, and that's what makes it romantic. Is this intensity of the feeling, because what would make that romantic? And another example of a suicide: a man, mid-80s, stage 4 cancer, takes some barbiturates at 2:32 in the morning to end his life. Why would that not be romantic and the other one was?
Well, the first one you see someone who's so full of youth still, and it's kind of like more of a shock that somebody that could do that.
Good, yes, the shocking aspect. What about all the other parts of it? What are some other romantic elements there in what I just described? The moon, okay, so the nature. Because that's one thing the romantics become very interested in. They talk about what's called the sublimity of nature. So when you talk about a word, the sublime, it means so intense it's led by God. So it's awe-inspiring, the sublime. So look at the nature I just described: the ravaging waters, the full moon. And what about the timing? What makes midnight so much more romantic than 2:32 a.m.? Okay, because it's the end of one day, the start of a new day. So it's bridging the new and the old. Good. All right, and it begs questions. In hearing about that painting, what do you want to ask? Why, right? Why would this good-looking young man, why is he all alone? Why is he ending his life, and then why is he ending it that way, jumping off of a cliff? So, the other one's rational. You can understand why someone with stage 4 cancer already in the mid-80s would decide to end their life. It may be sad, but it's not tragic. The other one is tragic because it has the intensity of that feeling behind it. So that's the kind of topics that the romantics are very interested in, the most dramatic topics possible. And we're going to see that with the romantic literature here. Okay, now one of the first of the romantics, or one of the strangest of the romantics, and they're definitely a strange bunch. Now, what's going to unite all of these different romantics, Byron, Wordsworth, Scott, and Keats, is they're all talking about escapism. Escapism from from the modern world, from the boring nature of everyday life. So they're going to escape into alcohol, drugs, sex, suicide, the future, the past, anything other than what's before them. Because, as I described last time, most of our lives are spent in very boring things. So I think I told one of you, get used to being bored, because much of your life is going to be centered around being bored. One of the things you have to learn how to deal with. Doing something the first time is often exciting, but most of the things that we do are just very mundane, not particularly interesting or anything you really want to do, but it's part of the human condition. They're trying to away from that and feeling that seems to really firmly be, I would say, your generation, and see this college. I don't know if that's nicer or probably not. But I noticed nobody's disagreeing. All right, so Lord Byron. All right, so Lord Byron, first of all, one of the things that Byron says is he hates the aristocrats. He says the aristocrats are mundane, predictable, and boring. Byron has a lot of contradictions in Byron. Now, meanwhile, out of all of those romantics, he's the only one that calls himself by his title of Lord. So he's talking about how much he cannot stand the aristocrats, and meanwhile he constantly is letting you know he is an aristocrat. Very much part of a romantic era. So he is going to have a lot of interesting and strange and exotic experiences in his life, and he's after the strange and exotic. Okay, he sleeps with old women, 50 to 60 years older than him, and he also sleeps with teenage boys considerably younger than him. Now, why these two different groups that are so different? All about new experiences. Now, Byron lives apart from most people. He lives in an estate that's away from everyone, and he does most of his writing in the semi-dark, so at the wee hours of the morning. He has servants to take care of him, but he doesn't want them to face him. So he doesn't want to see them, he doesn't want to talk to them, he wants them almost not to be there, but still there to make them comfortable. He puts almost all of his money into something that has nothing to do with him at all. He gets really behind the Turkish uprising. He doesn't know anyone Turkish. He himself is not, but he gets tacitly involved with that cause. Now, there's an interesting film that was set one particular day in the life of Lord Byron. You sometimes see it on the Independent Film Channel. It's called Gothic. And Gothic is pretty accurate to this account of one day in Byron's life. Now, Byron and his three closest friends, Percival Shelley, Mary Shelley, and Coleridge. Samuel Coleridge, all very famous romantics, they all have a poetry writing contest. So between 9 o'clock and midnight, each get as high as they can, and then they have a competition that who can write the best poetry. And then they judge it at 6 o'clock the next morning. Now you can see, Byron was a strong user of both opium, perfectly legal drug at the time, one should add, and a strong abuser of alcohol. Now you can see the influence of the opiate in his writing style. Parts of it are very jagged and rough. Other parts very serious, so dreamy and fantasy based. Okay, but so how is Byron escaping? Okay, he's escaping his reality into unusual sexual partners, into the use of alcohol and drugs, in loneliness and passion for an irrelevant cause. So all of these things kind of show what Byron's about. But that's what he's all about, these different types of escapism. Okay, well, another famous romantic, William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth, an English romantic poet. And one of the themes that Wordsworth was obsessed with was nature. So he's writing a lot about the sublimity of nature, the sense that you feel God's inspiring characteristics in nature. So he particularly writes a lot about the idea of what's called the English garden. All right, what makes an English garden different than a continental or French garden? Does anyone know? All right, the English like to say their gardens grow willy-nilly, which means wherever it wants to. They're not designed by shape, by form, by size, by row. So continental or garden, they're very planned. They're very organized. Like think of like a topiary. You know, a topiary. Does anything actually grow like that? No. It's planned. It's teased. A lot of work goes into it. So the continental gardens, everything designed by shape, by size, by color, everything very planned and organized. The English gardens grow very randomly, as the English like to say, willy-nilly, wherever it wants to. So the English gardens are kind of a cornucopia of different colors, just whole different color, size, shape, combinations all put together. So it's in this randomness that Wordsworth is yearning for. Now, what's the big deal about nature at this point? What's happening around him that would make him yearn for nature? Right, exactly. And remember, before that, England was mostly a rural nation. It's becoming more and more industrialized. And he's saying you don't feel God's omnipotent presence, this feeling of godliness. You don't feel it in a Manchester smokestack. You see it in the random beauty of nature. That's where you see God. God is in nature. So he's yearning for it. He has this yearnings that are becoming more and more rare. It's like, think of something that you grew up with that is becoming rare, rarer every year, and it's going to soon be gone. You're going to have like a yearning for it because it's not there very much longer. That's what he feels, this change in English society from beautiful random nature to very planned, ugly, grimy city. Okay, so that's what he's escaping into nature and saying that's where you see God. That's where this sense of awe. All right, so let's talk about another English romantic who was also interested in escapism, and that is number 3 here, Sir Walter Scott. All right, we see something about him already. Remember we talked about this when we were talking about Sir Edmund Cartman. The fact that he gets his very esteemed title of Sir. All right, now he's not going to be English. With that name, he's actually going to be Scottish. So what Sir Walter is writing about is one of the things that he talks about is what's called Victorian medievalism. Now, there's something kind of unusual in that term. What's kind of a little odd about that term? Yeah. Right, good. 2 different time periods. And are these 2 time periods right next to each other, chronologically? Okay, fair enough. Now, the Middle Ages is about 600 years before the Romantic period, the end of the Middle Ages. So the Middle Ages actually go all the way from about 500 AD till about 1250. So what are, okay, so it's two completely different periods, and periods that don't have much in common at all. So what are the